Okay, hey everyone, we're back and we're here with Jim Fisher again. And there's just so much to talk about. We keep getting together because there's so much to cover. Hey Jim,
Hello, how are you, Sharon?
I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for being here again.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's continue our conversation. We were talking about animals and pets on the other side. And can you share what you were telling me?
Yeah. A number of near-death experiencers talk about when they're on the other side, they run into loved pets. I remember one experience. A woman was involved in a car accident with her pet, and in that her near-death experience, there were woods across the street from the accident scene, and her dog was at the border of the woods, barking at her like, "Come with me, come with me."
Wow.
And somehow she knew it wasn't her time, so the dog went off into the woods. And in the real, in this physical realm, the dog died, and the woman came back and was resuscitated. Uh, if you read some of the other, there's communication, conversation, sometimes between a near-death experience or when they're in that non-physical state,
Mhm.
conversations with their deceased pets. So I wondered if does that maybe indicate that animals, in this case pets, have some means of remembering things. It
Mhm.
may not be like our processing with our brain, but if they can have conversations about shared experiences when they're on the other side, that would seem to indicate that somehow our pets are recording what's going on in this um, life in this physical realm.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I know in my own experiences, I've seen some of my pets in my out of body experiences. I didn't see them in my near death experiences
Mm-hmm.
that I recall, because I'm sure I don't recall everything from my near death experiences. And I don't know if anyone can recall everything because it's, a lot. and
So when you have an out of body experience and you
mhm.
run into a pet, is this a deceased pet or do you run into pets that maybe have a life right now?
Both, actually. My pets that are, or my dog, my animals, companions that are in the body now, sometimes travel with me, which is really funny.
Yeah.
Be, they're not as attached to their bodies usually as we are, so it's easier for them, just like children. So, but I have also um, ran into my deceased animal companions as well on the other side, and two dogs in particular that I remember that were I was really close to in this life. I mean, I've had a lot of animals, but these seem to be the ones that I believe that um, I was closest to. One dog I recall during my meditations having many lifetimes with, and she came to me. We were together in different forms. I remember her being a horse. She was a pure black dog,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember her being a pure black horse. Actually, a couple of lifetimes like that. I also remember her being a pet squirrel, the same soul of that animal.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so and the dog I have now, a Yorkie, I also recall that she was with me in other lifetimes as a dog in China. I lived in China, and I remember that she was a dog with me in China. And I believe that she carries some soul aspect of a dog I had in this lifetime earlier, who crossed over around the time that she came into my life. And I don't see her or feel her on the other side anymore, but I do feel my black dog. And I've seen her in out
Mm-hmm.
of body experiences.
So this, I like to think about what the implications are for some of these things. So you say um, your pets have come back in different animal forms,
Hmm.
and dogs don't always come back as dogs, for
Hmm.
example. Um, so I wonder if a pet could come back in a human form.
Mhm.
Or on the other side of the coin, if we wanted to, could we decide to come back as an animal rather than as a human?
Mhm.
I don't know
Yeah,
if you have any thoughts on that, but it just it occurred to me as you were talking, it raises a question about this interchange between species.
right. Yeah, that's I hear that question a lot too, and I've had a lot of reflection on that myself, and communication about it. And I know that in the book, the studies, the Law of One, they talk about that. Are you aware of the Law of One studies?
No.
Yeah, it's channel material that I think is probably the best channel material out there. Um, and and they talk about that. And I believe, what I feel is that I believe at this time, this point in time, that animals uh, eventually move into that space of reincarnating as a human,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to do with self-awareness, and that animals say that are in the wild, not that they're not self-aware, but there's that awareness as like a human would have, the personality, the ego, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
is what I understand and what I've learned is what is the evolution of of a soul. And so we start out. I have memory of starting out as like, amoeba and all of that, or even, before that, up to the human um, frame form,
Mm-hmm.
from elemental to animal
Yeah.
to human and all that. So I believe it's just the evolution. I mean, they're of course a lot closer to spirit, but then there's that 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 other step of being that of self-awareness. I think is where they go once they um, uh, have that wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, of a human experience, and we give that them with our love and companionship and that kind of thing. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah. So evolution, spiritual evolution, can
yeah,
happen on a variety of levels.
right.
I find myself thinking, I don't have any definitive answers on this, but when I interact with our dog,
Hmm.
um, I kind of keep in the back of my mind that I have a responsibility maybe to help my dogs, each dog that I've had, evolve, and they have a role to play in teaching me how to love.
Hmm.
So we mutually benefit from our respective incarnations.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, totally. That makes sense. As
Yeah.
far as humans being animals, I had memory of being animals, but it was pre-human type of experiences that I remember. But I also have memory of being other types of beings on other planets.
Mhm.
So, whether
Well,
that's
that's
pre-human, post-human, I don't know.
well, but maybe Robert Monroe, if you've read, I think you've read his
Oh
three
yeah,
books.
I've read his books. Yeah.
He talks about this intelligence, non-physical intelligence, deciding to come to Earth and have a human experience,
Hmm.
and he gets caught up in a cycle of human experiences. So, if we think of ourselves being spiritual beings, that may mean a lot more than just being humans.
Right.
Maybe we can choose to have an incarnation in another species somewhere else in the universe, and that we're not necessarily wedded to, it may be that Earth is a very attractive place to incarnate for all the challenges that we can have here, but
Hmm.
I don't discount the possibility that we can incarnate elsewhere.
Sure. It makes sense to me. Why would we, why would an infinite intelligence just,
Yeah,
just give us one way to experience everything there is to experience in this
yeah,
form? Yeah.
yeah. I think one of our challenges in this human form is how do we how do we accentuate our imagination? How do we, I mean, if you think of science, we've come a long way in 500 years of science, but for the most part, those in where we've made improvements, they've been incremental improvements. We don't have too many inflection points where something really significant
Mhm.
changed. I would take maybe the Wright brothers as an example of a couple people who had great imagination, and look what happened in a fairly short period of time. We went from people not thinking that we could ever fly
Right.
to we've got these amazing jets that can transport us from place to place, and we can take some people out in outer space.
Sure. And probably a lot more than we even know.
We may have talked about this before, but an example of imagination, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, these huge um, telescopes
Steady.
or radioscopes. Yeah, SETI.
Mhm.
Um, that's predicated on the assumption that other civilizations would follow a path that human evolution has taken.
Right.
Maybe that's not, if we become more imaginative, uh, um, maybe we should be spending a lot of money trying to uh, look at other alternatives that we haven't even thought about.
Yeah. 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 I think that I, my belief is that we already have extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call it, intelligence that we are communicating with through, maybe the secret space programs, parts of the government or whatever. And I know that I, I mean, I have experiences of my own as well. Nobody can tell me they're not real.
Mhm.
Where I've
Did we talk
communicated and
about
recall.
Joe McMonagle's? He's one of the preeminent remote viewers. Did we
Right.
talk about his remote viewing on Mars?
Did we talk about it?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, I took his class when I was in at Gateway, or not at Gateway, yeah, at the Monroe Institute, and also I read his book. But yeah, and also another one is Courtney Brown. Have you read his books?
No, I haven't.
He's another remote viewer that remote viewed Mars and uh, a lot of the extraterrestrial civilizations. But yeah, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah. So I don't remember where I heard it. I listened to it. Um, he was given some coordinates by his handler, and the
Hmm.
handler didn't tell him where the coordinates were. So Joe goes into his remote viewing frame of mind and starts telling his handler what he's seeing. And he sees these enormous, eroded pyramid like structures. Um, and they're much larger than what exists in Egypt. So it's obviously, uh, and they're so eroded, they're someplace else. So the handler tells him, "Okay, Joe, I want you to go back 1 million years in time." And what do you see? And time is not a particularly relevant thing when it comes to remote viewing. So Joe goes back 1 million years, and now these pyramid structures are not eroded anymore. They're pretty new. And he's telling his handler, "I see these structures here now, and there's a civilization here." And the handler asks him, "Well, can you interact with these people? Do they know you're there?" And Joe says, "Yeah, it appears to be. And let me try communicating with them." So he has this communication, and the beings tell him that the planet is not going to support their civilization much longer, and that they've sent off exploration teams to try to find a place they can move their civilization to. And these pyramids are intended to be structures to keep the people who are on the planet alive long enough for the explorers to go back, come back and tell them what they found, and then they'll move there. So it's a pretty wild, from a skeptic perspective, a pretty wild, how could you possibly do this? But you and I have met Joe and we know something about his experiences, it's to me, it's not outside the realm of believability.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, he talks about how the governments have been using remote viewers for a very long time.
Hmm.
So, he was one of them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it makes total sense. And
yeah.
as far as other intelligence out there, I kind of think it's naive and arrogant to think that we're the only intelligence, in the universe, because if we're the only intelligence, we're in big trouble in my opinion, because we're not that intelligent compared to, I think, maybe than
So some out of
the rest of
body
the universe.
travelers, I'm thinking particularly of Jürgen Ziwe,
Yeah.
have in their out of body experiences, they run into other um, forms of life. Have you ever had
Right.
that in your OBEs?
I have, but not that much. But it's I I believe that they're working with me to help me even currently, to help me be able to see them a lot clearer, because I have experiences as a child,
Hmm.
and which was pretty scary. So when they appear to me in my out of body experiences, they appear in a way that is, something that I'm more comfortable with. But when I come back, I realize who they are. They're the grays, and I see them in like a gray robe, and they're short, and they have like this deadpan look on their face, or they look like it's however they appear to me. I don't really know what they are, what their appearance is, until I'm back in this conscious state, even though I'm conscious there, but I don't see them that way there.
Yeah,
So yeah, I have seen um, human-like extraterrestrials quite a few times. Yeah,
yeah,
and I have seen a lion being who I understand is like a Syrian lion being, and felt him, and he kissed my forehead, and I could feel his the the feel of his lion mouth
hmm,
on my forehead.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Well, we wanted to talk a little today about soul retrieval.
Yes,
You want to get into that subject?
of course. Yeah.
Um, you've had your own experience with this. I have. Um, I've been exposed to it. I can't say that I feel I've done anything like that. Um, my first exposure to it, I think, was I read a book. I think her name was Monica Holy or Holly, Fringe Dweller on the Night Shift. And it seemed, she in her dream state would run into um people that hadn't realized they died and needed assistance making their transition.
Mhm.
Actually, now I think about it, something that predates that. When I went to the Monroe Institute for the first time for the Gateway program, did you listen to the recording of Robert Monroe with Patrick, the deceased
Yes.
young man from the late 1800s?
Yes, that affected me so much. I think
Mhm.
that is kind of the what opened the door for me, was that recording.
Uh, in a nutshell, um, a friend of Robert Monroe was a channeler. And for your listeners, she was channeling, went into this trance channel state, and this voice came through to Robert and asked if he'd help this young man make his transition. And when Robert agreed to do that, the voice changed a little bit, and Robert interacted with this young man named Patrick, who apparently had died in a ship explosion in the late 1800s. Um, on the other side, there isn't any sense of time. So Patrick thought he'd been clinging to wreckage of the ship for, I don't know, 100 years or more, until Robert came along and helped him understand that he had died And the boy then, he instructed the boy to look around and see if he could find a light. And Patrick looked around, saw a light. This light grew in size. He realized that there were people in the light and that his people were his parents. And he then was able to make a move on to whatever awaits us and not be stuck in this belief system that he was still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, that was incredible. I actually I call those, yeah, it's spirit rescue, and I actually just did a video with someone where we did some spirit rescue, and I have audio of rescuing spirits and their voices on audio through Spirit Box or EVPs. So I think it's probably some of the most important work we can do, not only for ourselves but for, I mean, it's all for ourselves because we're all connected anyway. But because can you imagine how many people have died and how many people might be stuck in the in-between state? I mean, that's, even though there is no time and space, that's pretty darn
Yeah.
crowded.
Yeah, I had yesterday morning, every Thursday morning, I get to group together with a group of men. We
Uh-huh.
call group Faith Exploration. And it's done under the auspices of a Presbyterian church. It started off a long time ago as a Bible study.
Hmm.
And as we became aware, or certainly as I became aware of the subject matter that we've been discussing, not just this, but all the things, we started going beyond just biblical stuff. So yesterday we've been studying this series for Bart Ehrman is a historian that's focused on the Bible, and I posed the question. If you look at the most prolific writer in the Bible, um, it was Paul, right? The majority of all the books in the New Testament, most of them were somehow either written by Paul or associated with him. And what converted Paul was, as I think we said in a past conversation, this after death communication that he had with Jesus.
Hmm.
Um, so the Bible talks about Jesus going, or at least the Nicene Creed talks about Jesus going down to hell for 3 days before ascending. And I posed the question to the guys, what do you suppose he was doing in hell for 3 days? And it's kind of, oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. And I said, well, let's talk about soul rescue. And, I was trying to help them understand that if, there may be aspects of the Christian belief system that tie into the subjects that we're talking about, but because they're not well understood, the Christianity doesn't spend much time thinking about these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's a question for you. If you've been doing this work, have you ever had um, a rescue? What did you call it though? You called it something
Spirit
else.
rescue.
Spirit rescue. Have you ever had one that had, I'm going to use a word, that veridical component, that had something in it that would indicate that this was not just a dream or a hallucination? Have you ever had anything that you could, I mean, when you're in the midst of this, that this is real,
Hmm.
but because you've had those experiences, but for somebody who hasn't had that experience, that may be thinking, well, this is just a dream, there's nothing to this. There's, I'll share one that I'm familiar with that had a verifiable component to it. And it was at the Monroe Institute Lifeline program.
Hmm.
Um, for a week's time, the participants in this program were um, put into an altered state using sound technology and well, what the booths are like.
Let me see. Oh, right. Yeah.
Um, and we were supposed to try to find people that needed help making a transition. Um, and if we met somebody that needed help, we were encouraged to get information. See if you can find the person's name. Where are they? What can you get in the way of evidence that we
Hmm.
could subsequently do some research on to see if there was any merit or truth to what you experienced. So Natalie Sudman had one experience where she interacted with a man who had been involved in a Civil War battle. I don't remember where it was, but she got the man's name and she got the battle that he had most recently fought in.
Mhm.
When we came out of this altered state, she reported this experience. The Monroe Institute gave that information, the name and the battle, to a researcher. And he
Mhm.
went around to libraries and other places that stored Civil War memorabilia. And one of these places, he found a diary that had been kept by a soldier who had fought in that particular battle. It was in his diary about that battle. And in his diary, he referenced his friend who had been killed. And the friend's name was the name that Natalie had come back with from her experience.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it's not proof, but I guess I would say, for those people who maybe really doubt whether there's any merit to this, it's a piece of evidence that
Yeah.
I don't think you can discount this. That for you and me, of course, we don't discount it, but
Right.
there's so many
Yeah.
people that may discount it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence out there. I know with my audio, I have a lot of evidence that I am helping people. But from my personal experience with something like that, when I first started out, um, I was on this was probably 20 years ago, I was on an out of body experience group and an online group. And I was sharing my experience. It was after uh, the do you a rock band called Great White, and there was a fire in Rhode Island where a lot of people died in a club. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely. Yeah.
Okay, so it was. I had made a plan to go rescue to see if anybody that died in that club needed help with rescuing.
Mm-hmm.
So I used the out of body method that night, and I went there. I ended up in someone's house first, and I described the house, and I described the people, and I saw them playing cards, and then I went to the club after. And when I had shared it on the group, this gentleman on the group said that I was describing his house, and
Mm-hmm.
also he and his wife. I described the people there, and I saw 4 people playing cards, and he said that he and his neighbors or friends, neighbors, always play cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was seeing those experiences, uh, and then we started communicating. And as we were communicating, I was having memories of it's interesting you bring up Civil War, of Civil War memories of having a brother. And he was having memories of having a sister.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sharing these memories at the time, and we were sharing with the group, and we realized that we were brother and sister in that lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were having very similar memories. His name was Quincy, my name was Prudence. And he, it just blew our minds because we
Mm-hmm.
didn't know each other in this life. But I was drawn to him for some reason. I went to his house,
Yeah.
in that out of body state.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's, that was proof enough for me that this is
So
real.
when you were doing this spirit rescue work for that particular incident, did you do
Yes.
this by yourself or did you get together with anybody?
Sometimes we get together. Yeah. At that point, I'm not sure because I used to do group rescue. I mean, I still do group rescues,
Mm-hmm.
but that online group, we might have done a group with it. I can't remember if I did it on my own, but I've done both. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, I may have told this story in one of our prior conversations about a gentleman named Vaughn Boone in Western North Carolina who used to do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
He would get together with a group when some tragedy struck, and the ones that
Yeah.
he specifically mentioned was World Trade Center and
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot from Bruce Moen, who wrote books about this. Do you know who he is? Because he learned a lot from the Monroe
You
Institute.
know, you're going to have to join the Consciousness Cafe.
Sure.
When you become a member, one of the things that members can do is submit recommendations for books.
Okay.
I imagine you've got an extensive library,
I do.
and
Yes, I'm a
we,
huge reader.
be
Yeah.
happy to. There's a form once you become a member, a form you can fill out recommending a book and putting your comments in, and that'll get added to our library.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah, but he, in his first book, I think he talks about going to the Oklahoma City bombing, sitting in a restaurant, in a bar, just doing the rescue there. And,
mhm,
and I learned from him too, that you don't have to be in that huge, deep trance in order to do it. You can, do it any time. You just have to focus and trust what you're getting. But yeah, he was
mhm,
doing rescues that way.
mhm.
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It seems
It's
that you know if we look at what near-death experiencers say about how they describe the experience, their consciousness
Yeah.
goes from being within their body to being outside their body, but their
Hmm.
thinking patterns are the same as if they were in their body in terms of, wow, look at this around me. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm not alive anymore. It's like it takes a little time to really sink in often, and that thinking pattern just continues on. Um,
Right.
so if people have been in a circumstance where they don't realize they died, and there isn't any way for them to, it's not as if, it seems as if it's not as if everybody just intuitively knows they've died. You need something to uh, help you understand that. Now, with a near-death experience, or it could be um, deceased loved ones who come to meet you, or going through a tunnel of light, or something that's otherworldly. But if you don't have an otherworldly experience and you're just seeing what's going on in this physical realm, you could I could see how people could think, oh, gee, I guess I haven't. It wouldn't occur to them if they've died, and because their conscious state doesn't recognize that, they stay connected to this physical realm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was taught that, and it's interesting you were talking about Jesus and about this type of work when I was first 20 years ago when I first started meditating, and when I went through my quickening and my near death experience around that time. It was Yeshua. I call him Yeshua. It was Yeshua who taught me about soul retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
And in my meditations, he's the one who worked with me. And, and not only about spirit rescue, but past life soul retrieval, where we retrieve our own aspects that get lost as well and get stuck there. But yeah, totally. I think that when when we die traumatically, eh, or suddenly or anything like that, we might not know that we've passed. And if we're attached to something, or we have emotional trauma or something like that, it can be easy to think you're still alive. Well, even though we are alive, because we don't die.
Right.
I
Yeah.
know, we don't die. And I know when I have out of body experiences, when I travel out of body, I have to test to see if I'm in my body or not in my body, or in in that second phase or whatever, because it feels so real. And I want to share a little experience I had that it's kind of like this, or it's has to do with what we're talking about. In my early travels, I had stepped out of my body, and something told me to turn around, because the first thing I do is get away from my body as quickly as possible, because you can be drawn back in. And so I turned around and I saw this body on the bed, and I just saw this blonde hair and the blankets up to here, and I'm thinking, who's that? And I think Robert Monroe actually talks like this about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is that? Who is that? And I realized, wait a minute, I think that's my, it wasn't me. I didn't think it was me, because I knew this was me.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't me. And my thought was that I wasn't attached or attracted to that body at all. And what came to my mind was, this looks like a bag of bones. That was the
Yeah.
phrase that came to my mind. And I'm like, interesting. It was an epiphany for me because I realized that's not me. My body is not me. This light, this essence is me.
Hmm.
And that was a huge turning point for me.
So at that point, you felt a distinction between your light self versus your physical self.
Definitely.
When you're in your day-to-day life, can you sense your light self? And most of us, myself included, while I have an intellectual understanding that I'm so much more than Jim Fisher,
Hmm.
um, I can't experience it in my day-to-day life. My day-to-day life, the body so absorbs, the five senses so dominate what's going on that I'm Jim Fisher.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering when you are in your day-to-day, because you've had the near-death experience and you've done this out-of-body work, can you feel a dissociation between your light self and your human self?
The only time I do, I believe, is when I'm in meditation and reflection and I disconnect from the outside world,
Mm-hmm.
or and I'm in a state of joy, like dancing, singing, laughing, all that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Then I do, yeah. When I feel just kind of light as air, you know what I mean? Because that's how I feel. That's how we feel in the outer body state. Yes, but when I'm focused on, the illusion of our
Mm-hmm.
life, it isn't something that it's not that I'm disconnected. It's just a different, like you said, it's a different focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how often do you get engaged in spirit rescue work?
Oh, probably every day, because I do this with my clients with soul retrieval, and so in my work, I'm it's pretty much, it comes up almost all the time in a session, not always,
So,
unless we're doing a mediumship session, but yeah, I
so
mean,
can you
quite often.
describe that for me when you do spirit rescue with a client? Give me like a prototype of what that might look like.
Okay, so that would be more past life soul retrieval, which is pretty much the same thing. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
aspect of a person, which is, a part of us that's another lifetime, like with Rosie McKnight and Patrick. This
Mm-hmm.
was a part of her that was stuck and hadn't been integrated, right? At the Monroe Institute.
Yep.
Okay, so because this was her lifetime, that's why he came up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I understood it.
So are you putting somebody into a hypnotic state that allows them to do experience a past life?
Well, I do that too. Yeah, both.
So that's different then.
That's different. They're experiencing it themselves. Yeah, yeah. But I can also help people with doing readings with them, and we sit together, however we do it, and I just look at it with them, for them, and look at a situation that they might have challenges with, and I just see the pattern, and I see a lifetime where it began, and this is what Yeshua taught me how to do way
Mm-hmm.
back when with my own life, and brought up a bunch of patterns and helped clear those, and lots and lots of patterns. And so we have lots and lots of these, right? And so what I do is I sit with a client, and I look at whatever comes up. I trust guidance to bring through whatever comes up that they know is best for them at this point in time. And I just get a few of the details. I actually teach a workshop on this because we all know how to do it on our own. We just forgot. So he taught me a really easy method, and I teach people how to do it on their own. It just takes time and focus. And so I look at the situation, look at the emotional baggage, that kind of thing that's there, that's
Mm-hmm.
creating the pattern, and then I help that personality and any helpers that are there, I help them understand that they have left the physical, their lifetime is over, and they chose it for soul growth, and all they need to do is turn around and look for the light, and then see their loved ones there, and tell them that their future self can use their help because they're still experiencing the same pattern, and it's time to integrate that and clear that. And so, and 9 times out of 10, the experience for the client makes total sense because it's mirroring what they're experiencing in their current lifetime.
Yeah. It sounds slightly different than what there's a book, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yes. Yeah.
Dr.
Brian Weiss.
Yeah, Brian Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
And with his patient, if I recall correctly, he would put her into a hypnotic state and she would start remembering a past life that had a traumatic event in it or something. So I was making a distinction between how Brian Weiss handled things and how you handle them. Brian puts it, his patient into a state, hypnotic state, to recall these past experiences, traumatic experiences, and he tells his patient in this life, that was your past life. You don't need to let these traumatic events from a prior life affect you in this life.
Right.
That let his patient release, for example, a phobia of water. She had drowned in a past life, and in this
Mm-hmm.
life she had a phobia. And when Brian helped her understand, that's not this life, you died in a past life, she was able to let go of that phobia.
Nice.
But you take it a step further, it seems to me. You're helping the prior life person resolve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me like that might be a more thorough resolution than, Brian was kind of treating the symptom and you get to the core cause.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but
As long as it helps.
it's also Robert Monroe found in his out of body travels that he would find aspects of himself that needed to be rescued.
Right.
And I remember at that Lifeline program, there was another participant who had his experience. In this altered state, he found a little girl that was scared and in a corner of a room. And he came over and took her by the hand and convinced her to follow him. And he told me later on that he understood this little girl as an aspect of himself.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't somebody else, it was himself in
Himself.
another life that needed help. And
Yeah.
that fits in with Robert Monroe's books, where he was helping all these different aspects of himself relinquish their whatever problems they'd had so that collectively they could evolve to another level.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I see it as, and how I was taught, as integration.
Yeah.
And I had a soul clearing one time where, after I was retrieving all these aspects, and this woman, she doesn't do it anymore, but I'm learning how to help people with it. Eventually, I want to do this, where through breath work, I was able to clear all my soul aspects, integrate them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, I'll never forget, after I did that one day, that night, I was wide awake, and I was having all these visions of, of experiencing how I was when I left source all the way back to source. All these different experiences, tons and tons and tons of experiences that needed to be integrated. And I could see them. Some were very quick, just blips as they went by, and others
Mm-hmm.
were more, it, obviously anchored within me. So it took a little while for me to see them. Like being burned at the stake was a really bad one, but things like that, And so all the way back. And I remember when I got up that day, when, for my day, I felt so full. So complete.
Hmm.
I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I didn't need, I'm getting goosebumps talking about, I didn't want or need for anything. I just felt totally complete.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I feel that these, as we go through life, it's something that probably little pieces of us get, knocked off here and there with our traumas every day. And so it's probably work that we should be doing all the time for
Yeah.
ourselves.
So
Yeah.
as you're just saying that, it's occurring to me in this particular time, and I'm cautious about talking about time, but if more and more of us are aware of this
Hmm.
aspect of things,
Hmm.
then is this a time when we're collectively evolving? Because instead of having our individual components just having their own experiences, we're beginning to um, collectively evolve.
Yeah.
I mean, all my past incarnations, and am I helping them through what I'm doing in this life? And you're obviously doing that with your incarnations. And I think
Hmm.
there are a lot of other people that there's this awareness that's growing. The blinders are coming off, and we're becoming aware of our true spiritual nature. And in doing that, that opens up the possibility for accelerated evolution.
Totally. Yeah. That makes complete sense. I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's a really exciting time.
So for all those people who are listening to this, you know, this is an interesting time to be here,
Definitely.
uh, and put some effort into building your awareness of who you are, so that you can participate in this.
Yeah. I believe that that's why we're here
Mhm.
for this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really exciting. I mean, it's challenging, of course, but that's what makes things worthwhile, right?
Well, life is, my biggest growth has been through challenges in this life.
Yeah.
I can look back with a thankful frame of mind for the things that were challenging. There are people that I interact with now that I can see they're struggling, and I, try to help them understand who they are, so that those day-to-day challenges that they're dealing with, they can deal with them, but not from a gee, ain't it awful frame of mind, but okay, if I'm really have divinity within, uh, you can you can create your reality. You can put yourself in a frame of, actually getting into the whole conversation of what was it, Abraham Hicks.
Hmm.
Um, you
Law of
we
attraction.
yeah we I remember reading a book by Dean Radin, who
Hmm.
is one of the preeminent writers about these things. He's involved in the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I think that's what that is called. And he says he was talking about a sigil, and I can't
Ascension.
remember sigil.
Oh, sigil. Okay.
It's like an SIDGEL, but I'm not sure how it's spelled.
Okay.
Um, where you create an image of something,
Hmm.
you draw it out. Let's say you have something you want to have in your life, and you
Hmm.
draw something that's associated with that, and you put emotional intent into it, and then you put this drawing aside. Don't look at it. You've put this energy out there by putting this together, and taking a moment to get emotionally engaged in what you've drawn, and then set it aside and see if that can be of some help to you.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. It's bringing what you have going on up here into the physical, right?
Yeah.
And
So I
emotion
did that.
always makes it better, easier.
I did
Oh,
that,
you
and
did? Yeah.
it's it's a work in progress, and you can't disclose what it is you did.
You mean to people around you? Or,
Yeah.
okay.
And so I have my sigil I put together, and someday if it comes to pass, maybe you and I will be talking. I say, remember that conversation I told you about my sigil?
Nice. I love that. I'm all about writing down or drawing what you want to manifest.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it works totally. Yeah. I used to draw. It's funny. I used to draw. I'm totally in love with Yeshua. I used to draw his face, right? And it's so funny because because I was single for a while, and then I met a man when I moved back to Oregon who looks exactly like him. And his name is Jay, and he's a carpenter, and people call him Jesus.
Yeah.
So, hey.
Well, we probably ought to bring this to a close. I've got somebody demanding a walk.
I see that. Yeah. Sounds good to me. Okay. And that's a good place to end it on, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. You're that meeting Jay and having all these components to it. So
yeah, we're still together. Yep.
Yeah.
11 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jim. As always, it's very interesting conversation. And I will see you soon at Consciousness Cafe.
That's right. Tomorrow evening at 7:00 Eastern time, we're going to this event on surviving death. People can go to consciousness-cafe.com and register for it if they happen to see this before that event happens.
Yes.
Otherwise, it'll be recorded, and you can watch a repeat of this on the consciousness-cafe website.
Cool. Yes, and I'll be chatting with your people there in the near future too, right?
Yeah. So your followers need to know that you're going to make a presentation later this month.
Yeah.
It's going to be on the 19th, isn't it?
The 19th. Yes.
Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, me too.
How do we take these? So far we've talked for 3.5 hours. How do we take all the subjects that we've been touching on, and how do you collapse? You have to kind of pick and choose.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, it'll be good no matter what. I'll just share what I can.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching.
These are good.